Welcome back. You tuned into Salam Media, and now we're speaking to, as mentioned earlier, I've got a lawyer, Azhar Chohan, who is a human rights lawyer, as well as he's a Kashmiri by origin, settled in the UK, and he's committed to the right to self-determination by the Kashmiri nation, and he also regularly speaks against oppression of minorities. And as mentioned earlier, he's going to assist us in terms of paying tribute to uh, the late Syed Ali Geelani, one of the most prominent figures in Kashmir resistance movement and the leader of the Hurriyat party. And last week, late last week, Wednesday, on the 1st of September, at the age of 92, sadly, he returned to the Almighty. And yes, so I've got, as mentioned, the family is under surveillance currently. And I would just, before I welcome Brother Azhar, I just like to share a tweet by his granddaughter Ruwa Shah. She says, Abba's death is a collective loss for us all. Our family deserved to conduct the last rites. We did not deserve harassment, threats, and scuffle. So that was Sister Ruwa's tweet on the 3rd of September. Assalamu alaikum, Brother Azhar Chohan, and welcome to Salam Media Mid Morning Talk.
Wa alaikum assalam, Sister Mariam Mia. I am really grateful and thank you for having me here to be part of this tribute paying to Syed Ali Geelani.
So tell us, as a Kashmiri yourself, I just read out Sister Rua's tweet. We had Sister Rua visit South Africa as well. She came and then she raised awareness in terms of the plight of the Kashmiri people as well. And when her grandfather had taken ill, she penned an article, said Ali Geelani, I'm sure you're aware, a life dedicated to the Kashmir and its people. And I had interviewed her at that time. And difficult times indeed for the Kashmiri people, but however, they felt they were robbed of paying tribute to him, uh, p- giving their last rites, as well as not only he was not only her grandfather, but the grandfather of the nation for the Kashmiri people. And under Indian administered Kashmir, they were not allowed to do it. So everything was hush hush. I'm sure you heard reports that he was buried ASAP, and they are under surveillance. So maybe can we just focus a bit on that event before then we discuss his life and times?
Well, first of all, my condolences to Sister Ria Geelani and also to all the Geelani family. My heart bleeds for them. It's not the Geelani family who've lost their father, grandfather, but the whole nation truly has lost its father, grandfather figure. Sayyid Ali Shah Geelani was a unifying figure for the whole of the Kashmiri nation, no matter where they live in the world. A very calm man, very passive, very passionate, and he said some fundamental issues which we'll come on to later. But the whole incident has shed a light on the plight of Kashmiris, and it has exposed the hypocrisy of the Indian democracy and the government and the state. Because what's happened here, every human being has a fundamental right to bereave their dead, to worship, to pray according to their conscience. Sayyid Ali Shah Geelani, when he passed away, he had left a will that he should be buried in the graveyard of the martyrs, Shuda. And that didn't happen. They buried him in a graveyard closer to his home. They didn't let the family take part. And what this is sad and tragic. It means it shows you how weak the state of India really is, because they're using might and power rather than let the will of the people take part. So I agree with the sister. They've lost their father, but the whole nation has lost its leadership. But Sayyid Ali Shah Geelani leaves a big vacuum that people cannot easily fulfill. But he leaves a legacy which is what every Kashmiri aspires to, is the right to self-determination, a right to conscience, a right to belief. And no doubt the Kashmiri nation will not forget him and his mission and his goal. And I would say he was a great Ghazi of the Kashmiri nation.
Yes, in fact, when you're saying that, I'm going back to in the article that Ruha penned in December. She says Abba wishes to be buried in the martyr's graveyard in Idgah, Srinagar. how his burial is handled is important for us because he is the head of family. And as you say, not only the head of their family, but the head of the Kashmiri people's family and those who are fighting for the right for autonomy and self determination. And
Absolutely.
she says, but most importantly, it is important for Kashmiri people because they love him, respect him, and look up to him. And as you say, it's a really travesty of justice uh, that this did not happen, and it speaks volume to India, who proclaimed to be one of the largest democracies in the world.
Well, absolutely. But it shows you we are now living under the regime of BJP, which is a very nationalistic Hindutva ideology that they carry. But they are oppressing not only the rights of Kashmiris, but you look at the Sikhs, look at the farmers' protests, look at the other minorities. This shows India is not as a peaceful nation as they claim to be. Yes, they have a huge economic might and they're using all their military might against Kashmir. But what's important here is that people's uh, thought, conscious belief is being oppressed. And you can only put a lid on a bottle for so long. When it fizzes up, then it will burst. And you have to remember, India is doing uh, exactly what the East India Company and the British government did before India's independence from the British uh, sort of colonial masters. And you have to remember the situation in Kashmir is worse than Gaza, is worse than what South African apartheid was, because the world was turning at attention to South Africa. In Kashmir, the world has turned a blind eye because of India's economic power and might. And that's a big difference. So the family wishes of being buried in one place is one issue, and that shows you violation of individuals' basic fundamental human rights and the violation of the family's rights. But they're also trying to oppress and contain the will and the conscience of the national Kashmiri people all over the world. And if you remember, if you look at the what's happened after his death, there was janaza prayers held all over the world in UK, Pakistan, Azad Kashmir, which is we call part of the Pakistan occupied, Gilgit Baltistan, and other countries as well. That shows you the amount of respect Syed Ali Shah Geelani had around the world amongst the Kashmir diaspora and other people who are freedom loving and those who really wanted to support his cause and his belief of conscience.
Okay, so let's focus a bit on the life and times of Sayyid Jalani, Rahmatullah alayh. So
Right.
tell us about his immense contribution to the landscape of the Kashmiri nationals' right to self determination.
Well, if you what Sayyid Ali Shah Geelani, he started off, he became, as you know, the Indian occupied Kashmir. He became part of the Legislative Assembly, hoping that he could bring about a peaceful change. But when he realized that the Indian government was going back on its promises of independent shaping of Kashmir, the Kashmiri people united would have a right to self determination, he called that goodbye. He gave up on the political career, but he wasn't a man who was going to compromise on his principles, on his belief, or sell out his nation just because of personal fame or glory. What what he started off was, as from a student life, he was interested in the politics of his people, serving the nation. He then went on, as you probably know, he was part of the Jamaat-e-Islami movement, and that was his faith conviction is what pushed him to have a conscious debate about what's going on. Later on, he joined the All Party Hurriyat conference, and you can see amongst the Hurriyat conference, which is a platform of all the political parties like-minded for Kashmir independence or plebiscite, where they would choose whether they can go independent or with Pakistan or whatever. The question is, the fear India has is because of the leaders like Sayyid Ali Shah Geelani, who said, you must give us a fair, independent, under the UN auspices, a right to decide. And when he joined the Hurriyat conference, the respect it brought to the table, the platform of that whole conference is immense, because he is one of the unifying fathers of all the parties, and they all trusted him, listened to him. And look what his slogan was: because of our faith, We are Pakistani because of our faith, and Pakistan is part of us because of our faith. Because we have more in common with Pakistan because of being Kashmiri nation. By and large, 90% is Muslim, and that what they said, we are more allied to Pakistan than we are to anywhere else in parts of India. Indian government didn't like this. They wanted to oppress. And he also said the number of, millions of soldiers you have here, you can bring all your armed forces here, but that's not going to change the will of the Kashmiri people. We as a nation are going to decide what we want to do, and that our destiny is in our hands. It's our choice where we go. It's not in the hands of the government sitting in New Delhi or anywhere else in India. And that makes a big difference. And he is somebody who's very passive. As I said, he was passive. He was very calm, very much knew what the nation wanted. He had his finger on the pulse of the mood and the conscience of the nation. And that makes a big difference. He wasn't somebody who just made hollow statements. You have to remember, not only he served many decades in prison, but also he was under house arrest. During the last 10 years of oppression by the Indian government, he was constantly under house arrest. And look at how his images shaped and moved the Kashmiri nation all over the world, including the protests. But India is one of those tyrant governments that doesn't want to listen to the conscience of the Kashmiri people. And that surely oppression cannot survive forever. It will come to haunt it because they're trying to force us to be part of something that we are not. We are a different geography, different religion, different culture, different ethnicity. So they are trying to keep us as part of some, melting pot, which we've never been part of.
Yes, as you've mentioned, iconic, legendary personality in the Kashmiri resistance movement, and he groomed many youngsters. Many youngsters were at his side, at his aid. And Ruha says he asked in the article she penned. She says he asked me if I'd seen my father Altaf Ahmad Shah, who, along with many other leaders from my grandfather's party, is in prison in New Delhi since 2017. You should meet the prisoners. Tell them that I pray for them and their sacrifice will not be wasted, he told me. My father worked with Abba for more than 35 years. He was a student activist when he joined the resistance movement. Abba was so impressed with my father that he eventually arranged for him to marry his daughter, my mother, and become part of his family. So, not only you know what he groomed, he mentored. So he was a mentor to many young Kashmiris around the area of Kashmir as well.
Of course. And that's an important legacy he leaves behind because not only was he a lone figure, but he made sure that the message survived in the next generation and the next generation, and people were aware as to what was going on. And these people will carry the message for many generations to come until we get our right of freedom and self determination. Because Syed Ali Shah Gilani not only mentored a lot of young people, but he made sure they understood the cause of Kashmir. So it wasn't in vain. And to be honest with you, without that, no nation can succeed in this mission unless the next generation, the second, third generations, or following generations understand what our fight, what our cause is for.
And this article was so poignant as an insight into Sayyid Jilani's life and times. Roha writes, Abba dedicated his life to Islam and the Kashmiri freedom struggle. For him, the two have always been inseparable. And that is iconic in terms of, Islam is a way of life. And this is what he wanted for the Kashmiri people. She goes on to say, this is why even when he barely had energy to breathe, he was either reciting from the Quran or talking about Kashmir. Do not give up on freedom. I want you to help me with the pronunciation. It says Zulam Chino Ni Poshan. Oppression does not last. Abba kept repeating as I spoon fed him. He kept reciting to himself as he was trying to etch those words to his memory so that he would not forget what he had stood for all his life. Can you comment on that and just probably assist me with the pronunciation of that?
Well, basically, you probably know what it is. Essentially, what he's saying, oppression, zulm, is it does not last forever. and zulm ultimately has an end. Zulm is oppression, but it's a very harsh oppression, where is tyranny. More accurate word I would use is tyranny. Does not last forever, and there will be an end to tyranny, and there will be new light at the end of that. So you have to understand, our faith in Islam teaches us tomorrow will be a new dawn, and we must remain steadfast in our faith, in our prayer, in our conscience. We don't oppress anyone else, but we also know that we must stand up to oppression and tyranny, because it means Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give us a new dawn tomorrow. And Allah will only help those who help themselves. So if we do not stand up to oppression ourselves, then we cannot expect that suddenly things are going to be miracles. And we have a prime example in that, if you notice, in Imam Hussein, he stood up to tyranny and oppression against Yazid. And the reality in Kashmir is we have a bigger taghut in the Indian government, which is trying to oppress the people of Kashmir. And Syed Ali Shah Geelani was trying to tell the new generation, look, don't forget, oppression will not last forever. And you must fight against this and make sure you understand your rights, your hukuk. And this is where we can change our destiny. So our destiny is very much in our own hands, if we know what we are fighting for, what our cause is. And our cause is very noble, a cause of independence, a right to choose our own destiny, where we go, our own future. And that's important.
Shukran, Brother Azhar, for availing yourself for paying tribute to the late Syed Ali Geelani. We make dua that the Almighty grant
Amen.
him the highest stages in General Firdaus. We
Amen.
wish his family and the whole nation of Kashmir comfort and peace during this
Amen.
challenging time. But Alhamdulillah, he's left a profound legacy indeed, in terms of, as even when he had very little energy to breathe, he kept on reciting Quran and
Amen.
uh, repeating those words that oppression will not last. Indeed, Islam is a way of life and religion of hope, and inshallah, those oppressors will come to book. And we make dua there for yourself, as well as for all the people of Kashmiri. Very soon, they experience their right to autonomy and self determination, and the struggle goes on. Uh, as you've said, he's groomed, he's mentored many, many activists the world over in standing up to the oppression. So, what that was, in the words of Syed Ali Geelani, oppression does not last. We leave this interview here, and we thank you for your time in being here on Salam Media.
Thank you for having me. And Jazakallah. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum wa
Alaikum
rahmatullahi
salam.
wa barakatuh. We're going to go for a short break, and then, yes, finally, I think we all deserve a good night's sleep today, Monday. On Monday, yes, sometimes Monday, because it's start of the week, I think everybody tries to sleep early, but then, yes, some people can't sleep due to snoring, or people that are affected by snoring, their quality of sleep is affected. But we're going to learn more about this, and how can we overcome this issue of snoring. All this after the break.